have a small amount of fun here on the Rec Poker podcast, whether it's jamming out to the intro music or it's just joking around behind the scenes. I have the best freaking job in the world. My name is Jim Reed. On Monday nights, I get to host this phenomenal podcast, the Rec Poker Podcast, but it's just the tip of the iceberg for what we do here at Rec Poker. We're a free poker learning community. We do road trips. We play home games. We've got forums. We've got a Discord channel. We've got a premium membership where you can learn along with other members of the Wrecking Crew and professional poker coaches. There's so much to find out about Rec Poker. There's so much to dive into. If you come on over to www.rec.poker and sign up for a free account, all it takes is an email address and a smile, and you can get involved with some of these fantastic people here, poker-loving people just like you. If you're listening to this podcast, I hope you're having a great time. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Jim Reed. I'm Bluffsterini in the home game and at Rec Poker Jim on Twitter. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. Most of what we do here at Rec Poker is free, like I say, so we're a largely volunteer-based organization. So we rely on our sponsors, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and of course, our premium members. We've got a wonderful premium membership program here at Rec Poker, and we've got a couple of our members, Eric and John. One of the perks of being a premium member, aside from being able to join all our learning material, our study sessions, all the stuff we do week in and week out throughout the month. Aside from being able to go behind the scenes of all these other great poker sites and using their own paywall premium training material, one of the perks is coming here on the forums edition of the podcast and bringing a hand that you found interesting today. So we're going to look at a hand from Ben Enslow. Ben's a member of the Wrecking Crew, just like me and Kevin Mathers and Daro Carney and a number of other wonderful people, Gareth James. We're all just poker lovers, and we're here to share that love of poker with the rest of the world. So if you want to find out more about me and the rest of the Wrecking Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew, but just listen up because you're going to meet a few of them here tonight.
As Jim mentioned, I'm Ben Enslow. I'm BJamin96 on Twitch. You can find the rest of my socials over there, and East Coast Bidder in the home game.
I'm Chris Jones. You can find me 5B5 on Twitter or 5x5 in the PokerStars home game.
My name is Eric Jin. I'm Binkley on the forums, COM Binkley in the home games, and you can find me on Twitter at Breck Binkley.
I am John Somsky. I am Poker Geek MN everywhere.
Nailed it, buddy.
I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Rabman50 just about everywhere.
I'm Taylor Moss. I'm at Taylor_Moss on Twitter and Gopherboy TJM in the Rec Poker home game.
So every week we get a different rotation of the Wrecking Crew. There's a lot of different Wrecking Crew members here. Not everyone shows up to every event. It's humanly impossible for one person to attend everything that happens here at Rec Poker. You could not do it. That's not hyperbole. It's impossible. You couldn't do it. So I'm glad to have these wonderful members of the Wrecking Crew here to talk poker tonight. And I'm so pleased when our premium members come and join us on the show. So we've got Eric and John here to join us tonight. Eric, why don't you share your username and where folks can reach you here in the Rec Poker home games and that kind of thing?
Best place to find me is at Rec.Poker. I'm E. Anderson85, both there and on PokerStars.
And I'm John Kroll. I'm 7-11 in the home game.
And if you're a regular listener, you've heard from Eric and John before. These are two fantastic poker players, posters in the forums. They're very active in our training material and our studies and events and study sessions and that kind of thing. They're also kicking butt in the home game club. It's no surprise that the players and members that get more involved, they pick up the material, they go and crush on the felt. So I'm grateful to you both for your support in the premium membership and for your insights that you continue to lend to all these episodes that we've been recording together over time. So we are assembled here tonight to talk about a poker spot that came up. I teased at the top of the show. It's a hand from Ben. Ben is a very popular Twitch streamer. He's putting out his action out there multiple days a week. You can go follow him at bjamin96, where he's got all his great stuff over there over at twitch.tv. And Ben, this is a hand that you played recently. You put it out on Twitter, and it ended up here in the Rec Poker Forum. So without further ado, just remind people again where they can go to watch you do your magic on Twitch, and then walk us through the hand here.
So as we say, we like to jam. Jamming is always happening on here. So it's BJamming 96 over there on Twitch. We're also on YouTube too. So if you guys want to check me out there, it's actually my name, which is just Ben Enslow. So you can go and look me up over there. If you guys have YouTube, it'd be great to get some more follows. And yeah, so we've been picking up some steam there. I'm still trying to learn the ins and outs of video editing, so that's always a fun challenge. So
yeah, there's a hole with no bottom. Good luck with that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah,
we'll put you on the payroll here in no time.
No, I shouldn't even have mentioned that, because now I know I'm going to be in for a world of hurt.
Yeah, you know it, man. All right, so this was what made this hand stand out to you?
So I've satellited in this specific hand. We've satellited into the $330 WPT main event. This is part of their main event, part of their winter festival. So it's a bit bigger than what I would normally play. I usually stick to like the $20 and $30 tournaments. I don't usually play in anything over $100. So it's a little bit bigger than what I would normally play. And it's day one. So we've picked a flight. There's multiple flights. So we've got to get to day 2 to make any kind of a cash or anything like that. So early on in day 1, I think we've got around 60 big blinds, I believe, to start the hand.
Yep,
we're in the hijack, and we have King 10 offsuit, and we raised. Yeah, I know. We were just talking about this hand actually, and how much it gets tricky because you have 2 broadways, but you offsuited is obviously diminishes the value right away. But I feel like it has some value, especially in this field where it's a lot of satellite players. And I think the field is pretty soft from what I've played on there, even in these bigger tournaments. And that's why I was really battling to try and win a satellite seed into this one, because I knew there was going to be lots of satellite players in spots that I could probably scoop up some chips.
A game selection. We talked about that's super important.
Yeah, so I think all that being said, I think and in the moment too, even if you go back and watch it, I was like, King 10 here. I even think about folding. I even say, I'm going to raise, and I take a little time, and then I make the raise. So we raised to 2.6. We get a cutoff call, which I'm not excited about in the slightest. And we get a big blind call, which I'm okay with. So I go to a flop. It's 10 high, and I'll let Chris take over because I'm not sure exactly what the board was.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I pulled this out is because this episode's coming out in February, but last month we really talked about multi-way spots. And when I saw this hand on when Ben posted it on Twitter and was sort of asking for some reaction to it, I was like, oh my God, this is like the perfect hand. This is like exactly some of the stuff that I've been looking at really closely, trying to study a little bit more. And I think it's a really good one for us to have a conversation around. So again, we have King of Diamonds, 10 of Hearts. The diamond is somewhat important in terms of thinking about this. And the flop comes 10 of Clubs, 7 of Diamonds, 3 of Diamonds. So we've hit top pair, second kicker, second best kicker. But we're in a spot, and this what we talked about in our deep dive was this is what I like to call the sandwich sort of position, where we open, somebody in position calls, and then the big blind comes along as well. It's a very common multi-way sort of situation that you find yourself in when you're in multi-way spots. And you're the original opener. This is one of the other one is when both blinds call, and that's sort of slightly different. But this is a really common one where you're the original opener, but you're not in position, right? And this is going to create a lot of things for us to think about. And I think that's where we want to kind of start the conversation about this. And I don't know what does everyone else think about this spot? Do we want to talk about this spot? So we've got 10 of Clubs, 7 of Diamonds, 3 of Diamonds. We got King 10 with the King of Diamonds. The big blind checks to us. Bet, check.
Well, the first thing you want to think about is how the equities are lining up. You're opening, from the hijack. Cutoff is calling. Now, the cutoff is actually going to have a little stronger range than the button would if the button had called, because the cutoff has to worry about 3 players that are one of them being in position. So the cutoff's range is going to be somewhat tighter than if we had gotten a call from the button. So right now our equities are probably really close. I mean, obviously Ben has all the aces, kings, queens, the ace kings, because those would probably 3-bet in the cutoff. But other than that, any of the other broadways are very much a part of the cutoff's range. And then probably any pair, so you're going to be looking at a lot of suited hands, suited connectors, a lot of Broadway cards, and a lot of pairs. It's not going to be as wide as when Ben said that he was glad that the big blind came along, because, the big blind is going to be sitting there with almost a 50% range. So you got to know that the equities are running real close between the hijack and the cutoff in this spot. Next thing that I think about is I'm out of position. And c-betting out of position is very, very difficult. I'm not, like Ben said, you're not really worried about the big blind. What you're really worried about is that cutoff, just because of his equity. So I'm wondering, what hands do we check here? What hands make good checks in this situation, knowing that being out of position, your frequency of c-betting is going to be much lower than if you're in position against two players?
Eric, did you have something there?
Well, I like to think about my reads on the cutoff and how much I need to protect my checking range. Especially in this position, sometimes I'll check 100% range. I don't think that's a bad strategy, especially if you think the cutoff is a more aggressive player and just will stab with anything. So if you do have that read, they love to stab. I love checking here. But conversely, if you feel they're overfolding, then you could stab. So I either like a check or small bet in this situation.
Eric Anderson? Oh, sorry, John.
Eric. Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I was just going to kind of pile on with Eric and say I love checking here too. And anytime you feel like raising, Rob mentioned that range advantage is probably pretty even. I was taught that if you have range advantage, you bet often. If you have nut advantage, you bet big. We don't have range advantage, so we don't need to bet very often. But if we do decide to bet, we bet big because we do have the nut advantage. And also, I would take all of those raises and turn them into check raises. I think checking 100% here would be great.
John Somsky. No, for some reason, John, your mic is just not picking you up immediately. Try again.
I can hear him.
Oh, really? Okay. Am I the only one that can't? Oh, all right. Maybe it's a technical issue on my end.
So my knee-jerk reaction would be to bet. But I think that's probably a mistake because I think you end up getting called. There aren't a lot of hands that are going to call you. You maybe get called by a 7. 8s and 9s might call as well. Other than that, you're probably not getting called by too much that you actually beat. I think you might get more value by allowing the cutoff to take a stab at it.
Can I be on the team bet bandwagon then? There's a couple reasons that I kind of like a bet here. First, a pair of 10s kind of needs protection. It's kind of a hand that really benefits from betting and getting hands like Queen Jack to fold or, something like that. Because when a Queen or Jack comes on the turn or even an ace, we're not happy anymore and we're really frustrated. And then if we think about it likewise, if it checks through and then more low cards come out, well, that's kind of scary for the big blinds range. So while when I bet here, I don't really expect it to go fold. I'm expecting probably one of them to fold, and I'm going to have a much better defined view of like how I'm hoping this hand kind of runs out. Because if the cutoff calls, It's kind of situations where it's like, okay, don't give me too many overcards. Maybe stay away from this flush. But having the king of diamonds and a top pair here, like I'm all right betting here. And if I ever get raised, I'm happy with that too. Like how much better can we be in this spot than having king 10 with the king of diamonds also in our hand. So I'm kind of happy with this spot, and I'm just going to bet here to just try and like deny equity from some hands that should just straight up fold when we bet.
Yeah, I feel like I'm getting pulled in multiple directions here on this spot, because this is one of those places, like a lot of spots in poker, where there's like competing factors. There's this our absolute hand strength, top pair, second kicker, makes me feel like we should be betting here. We get to kind of continue our aggression. There's definitely worse tens that are going to call, hands like 7-8, 7-9, stuff like that. I can think of like just a ton of hands that are worse than ours that will continue. The hands that beat us, there's not that many combos of them at this point. We haven't like narrowed our opponent's range to exclude a bunch of the other hands. Like there's only so many 10-7s, pocket 7s, pocket 10s. I think jacks plus pre-flop are probably raising us at a non-trivial frequency. So I feel like we've got value targets out there. I mean, king 10, don't get me wrong, it's a garbage hand. Don't play this kind of garbage. This is why you don't play king 10. It's a terrible hand. Offsuit. But at the same time, and like you guys were talking about earlier, I think Chris mentioned this, there's kind of like this, if this was a heads up pot, this might even be a hand, a spot that you would make a big bet on, because your opponents can't make a straight. They're going to have a one pair hand quite a bit, and you're beating almost every one pair hand other than ace 10. And yeah, so, but I'm also getting torn. I'm getting dragged in this other direction where it's a multi-way pot. I'm supposed to size down. I'm supposed to see bet less frequently. So I'm just running myself in circles here, to be honest with you. I'm glad we're getting so many different opinions on the crew here, because it feels like a spot that's not perfectly intuitive to me.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ben.
I was just saying, I'm surprised by how many people are saying check, but I do like it. I like the check raise, but we have to be to check raise. We have to be sure that somebody's going to bet. So that's where I'm kind of like, that's where I get into where you're saying, where you're kind of torn on what to do, because if I check raise, or if we check, I really want to raise with this hand, but I'm also like putting a lot of faith in this player behind to bet and make it a bet that I can check raise, and I'm not just going to check call where he makes a big bet. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, now what do I do? kind of thing. So, yeah.
One of the reasons that I when this hand came up, I was so excited for us to talk about it and to sort of put this into the forums, I think, is that this is the exact kind of hand that I think we really want to spend some time thinking about. And I love the perspectives being shared here. And I think like my initial instinct with this is like, I don't know what to do either. Like I want to deny equity. I've got the king of diamonds as sort of a parachute emergency, whatever hatch thing that I want. But at the same time, we are in a really precarious spot with this. And one of the things that if you haven't done this out there, either on the panel or in our audience, that as I've seen people talk about multi-way spots, one of the best tools out there that we can use if you don't have something that you're paying lots for, like simple three-way or something, is Flopzilla. And what you can do with, if you're not aware of this, with Flopzilla, you can actually analyze multi-way ranges and their equities against each other, and you can start to see how what different kinds of flops look like in this exact situation. And I, in the forum post, I actually ran this for this, and I think one of the really interesting things with this is that we, as the initial raiser in this hand, where we're maybe used to like, oh, I flop top here, I have initiative, this is really great. This is actually a spot where we are pretty even in equity with the cutoff. We're like really, really close, and the big blind actually has a decent amount. But more importantly, is that equity is distributed for the cutoff towards the top end of their, like, they have what Eric was talking about, more of the nut advantage here, which may seem counterintuitive. We've got top pair with a king, but they actually do have a lot of hands in their like the part of their range that is pushing their equity above ours are hands that beat us. And so one of the reasons I'm advocating for a check here is not necessarily for the opportunity to check raise, which is great. Let's have it. But I love this if this checks through. If this checks through and the big blind checks, now I have a ton of information. And let's just say the turn is a blank. It's not and I understand Taylor's point. If a jack or a queen or an ace comes, that's going to really muddy the waters for us. But if this comes through as a blank, basically any other card in the deck besides a jack, a queen, or an ace, and it's checked through, and then the big blind checks, I am betting with abandon here. Like, I am so confident in my hand at that point. Whereas right now I'm betting, and I feel like I'm almost betting for information. I understand we're also betting because we have value and equity protection and that kind of thing as well. But like, there's some element I think about this, and that's what I think when we're in these spots where we have to remember these flatting ranges in position, like the cutoff and the button type flatting ranges, are very narrow and very particular types of ranges. They're not top heavy, but they're not bottom heavy. They don't have any garbage and they don't have any great hands. Usually, some people might trap with aces and kings and that kind of thing, but most of the time they don't have that really top stuff, but they never have garbage. And so it's a very tough range to bet into, but once they check, it really diminishes the value of their range. So that's one argument for checking, at least.
And another thing I didn't think of before was the big blind could be getting ready to check raise us. I mean, they've got, at the board is 10-7-3. They got all those sets in their hand.
Yep. Definitely.
So it's better to check if they're getting ready to check raise us too.
Yeah, but they might have those. They'll have those types of hands more than we will, but the number of them in their entire range is very small.
Yeah, the percentage of their range.
The percentage of the range that actually have those hands is so small that I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah, I like Chris's point about if it checks around, that's a great outcome. And I think Taylor is right that there aren't really a lot of good turn cards for us. We don't really like high cards or low cards. But another competing factor, this is a hand of competing factors, is this isn't a three streets of value hand for us either. So if we can just lop off one of the streets and avoid having to play a big pot with a one pair hand on a dynamic board like this, because it's a very dynamic flop. It's very unlikely that a pair of tens is going to be the best hand at showdown if all three players continue to get to the river. But again, that makes that sounds like an argument for betting, doesn't it? That protection bet. Let's like end the hand right here. So I think that's. I'm just so confused that poker's a terribly difficult game to play, and I want to point out we're doing a good job of kind of teasing out some of the factors here, but folks. The link to this hand in the forums is in the show notes. So if you're listening to this podcast, flip to the show notes and click the link to see the hand. I say that because you don't need an account to look in the forums. You can join if you're just a podcast listener. Click on the link. And you really want to see the graphics that Chris has put together here and posted in the hand. The charts, the graph, the distribution that the solver outputs, it's much easier to kind of follow along and intuitively grasp what Chris is talking about if you come and take a look at the graphics in the forum post. And that's true for a lot of the hands that we talk about on the air here. I also want to point out that there's some fantastic comments here from some pretty new members here at Rec Poker. George has a response here and says that they're new. They say a check is probably GTO based on their little bit of knowledge. And if they're going to c-bet, would bigger be better? And Mezzodana, Dana Craven, who's a new premium member here, wants more information about the number of players at the table and some other information like that. Eric Anderson, who's here tonight, has posted a screenshot so everyone can see the positions and the stack sizes and everything like that. So I would say you'll get more out of it if you come and check out the forum post here. But we're gonna tease out some pretty cool stuff here on the show as well. So Chris, we're getting pulled in all these different directions. Where should we take it from here?
Well, this is why multi-way hands are really complicated. But I think one of the things to walk away from here is I don't think it's necessarily wrong to check or bet here. I think we probably ultimately, this is one of those that probably plays as a mix. But if your instinct, I think, is to do one or the other, I think you're probably not, probably not thinking about these spots as deeply. And you're probably playing them more like a heads up spot rather than a multi-way spot. And a multi-way spot is going to create a much more complicated dynamic, and one that can benefit from checking hands as strong as top pair sometimes, much more than we can in a heads up. I would never check this hand in a heads up pot. Well, I would rarely check it in a heads up pot against the big blind but against the button or the cutoff I might. But yeah, so I just think there's a lot to learn from these spots, and there's a lot to dig in. And it's one that I think we can, as we can hear, there's lots of ways to approach these.
Now, even before we move on to further action here, the people that would check this spot, where is the threshold for betting then? What is the hand strength? What's the worst hand that you're betting for value here? If we're checking King 10, is it Ace 10? Is it Pocket Jacks? Is it 7-3? Rob, you unmuted first. What do you think?
I think I'm looking for hands that I don't mind folding if I get raised.
Mm-hmm.
Or overpairs. Like you say, jacks, queens, those types of hands, I'd probably feel comfortable betting. But a hand like this, I like the check because you have to protect your checking range, because your checking range is going to have a lot of garbage in it. True. And you need to have some value there. This is right at I think this is about as high a value hand that you could have in your checking range. But I like having this type of hand in my checking range. Maybe even nines. Nines could be in my checking range also, because then I could still call a bet with nines. But if I get raised, I feel really uncomfortable. Now, if I bet out with jacks or queens or kings or aces, I'm going to feel very comfortable calling any type of raise. Whereas here, it just leaves me in a very icky spot. But I know I can call a bet.
Mm-hmm.
If so I check and get bet into, I feel I can call a bet with this hand.
You feel better about your equity when you're the one checking and calling the bet, as opposed to when you're the one betting and their stronger range is the one calling. That makes sense.
I stronger range is raising.
Right. I really agree with this. Like I want to bet the hands that I either feel comfortable bet folding or that I'm comfortable getting it in with, pretty much, like even though we're 60 blinds, so that's like overpairs. It's like nut flush draws on the strong end of this. And then it's like maybe some weaker holdings as well.
It's like pocket jacks with the jack of diamonds feels very similar to King 10 with the king of diamonds in hand ranking. You know what I mean? Like there's Ace 10 and then jacks is really the next best hand. So it does feel like we're right on the cusp for that. But like a hand like 8-9 of diamonds or something, it's going up and down with the flush draw. Is that one of those hands that you might bet here, or does it have so much equity that it also falls into this kind of I don't want to fold it to a raise?
What about top set? You're kind of blocking anything they're going to call with if you have top set. Wouldn't you want to kind of slow play that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm probably it's 10-7-3, right? So it's
10-7-3, yeah.
So it's my other sets that I'd probably be betting here as well. The sevens, the threes,
and we can have them all.
Yeah. Those combo draws probably are in there as well. They're ones that I feel like when the in position player starts to play back at us that we have, because let's remember the big blind can still have a pretty big hand here as well.
Yeah.
So we've got to get through 2 players when we bet here. And the big blind is not insignificant on this flop. So
this feels like a spot. If I've got 8-9 of diamonds, I'm probably bet shoving, just because you can actually get some folds from better hands. It's hard to get a fold from a better hand when you've got like king 10, because no one's folding a better hand. They're only continuing with better hands. Whereas 8-9 of diamonds, you've got 9 high. That feels like you have a lot of equity, but you have a low amount of showdown value. I like to choose those kind of hands for my semi-bluff shows. Okay, well, that's a lot of.
That is so much to take in. That was really good though, because in the moment, and the thing is, I haven't, usually I write these all out and I'm like, oh yeah, I got insight and stuff. I haven't done any of that. I clipped the hand, I threw it in there, I seen Chris post, I was like, good, right on, awesome, my work's done, wash my hands of it. But it's good because I'm getting all your guys' feedback that I haven't really heard or had the time to look at myself. So this is kind of giving me a different look where, yeah, it's good. I like it. So as you guys led into, and as I said, I was really excited about that in the moment. I was like, yeah, king 10, ooh, I'm going to bet. So we bet out 3.11 big blinds, and we get raised pretty quickly by the cutoff to 13 big blinds, and the big blind releases pretty quickly. And yeah, now we're in this spot that we all dread, or that we were kind of talking about.
Yeah, and there were
raised,
nine big blinds or so in the pot. So you bet 3 for about a third.
Mm-hmm.
And then get raised to 13, which is, as Chris references in the post, is like an uncomfortable amount. And we are the effective stack coming in here with a little over 60 big blinds. So we're out of position, and the in-position player covers us, and they're the one taking the aggressive action. So
exactly,
none of those things are really going our way at this point. But we've got, top pair, second kicker. So when and Ben, let's pause your action so that we can hear from everybody else. So what, after everyone swallows the little bit of puke that came up in their mouth when they got raised here, what's the next thing that you're thinking? Does anyone want to just eliminate any actions here, or is there one that they strongly prefer? Rob, what are you thinking?
Well, the first thing I would do is try to say, okay, what in the world is he raising me with? Mm-hmm. What kind of hand is he raising me with? The best scenario is he's raising me with a flush draw, right? Or a straight draw. Any other hand that he's raising me with has got me beat, because he's not raising you with Jack 10 or Queen 10. It's going to be a minimum of Ace 10, 10-7, which he probably doesn't have, sets of 10, sets of 7, sets of 3s, which he probably doesn't even have 3s in his range. So there's very few hands that he's betting this way that we're actually ahead of. So I just that would be my thought, and that's where I'd go into the tank and try to figure it out.
Eric?
Yeah, so a couple things just to note is that having the king of diamonds decreases the chances of them having a flush draw. The fact that the 10 is not a diamond on the flop means they could have a pair plus a flush draw, which has a lot of equity. We might be ahead, but it has a lot of equity if they have a pair plus flush draw.
Yeah, and if they do, if they have the 10 of diamonds, then the kind of hand that they're going to have is going to be like Jack 10, 9-10, 10-8. And those hands not only have a flush draw, but on 10-7-3, they also have a straight draw, or at least a backdoor. So they have a ton of equity to go along with their one pair hand. I guess one of the questions that Rob was kind of getting at here is, are they ever raising us with worse? Like, are they raising us with a worse 10 with the kind of hand that Eric's talking about, where maybe they have another diamond?
Only those diamonds that you mentioned. It's like, it's Jack 10, Queen 10, 10-9 of diamonds. Some of those are the only ones that we're beating that have a pair.
Right, and they raise they raised against 2 people because the big blind was still in the hand, and we expect the big blind to check range as well.
So it feels, and I guess I don't think we talked about this yet, but do we have any notes on this in position player, Ben? Have we been playing with them for long enough to get any reads?
That's kind of the thing that makes it a little tricky on WPT, is that there's no note taking yet. They're in their infancy of their site. So there's no actual note taking way of me to take notes on players like there would be on Stars or other sites that I play on. So, I in theory, I should be, taking notes and saying, okay, but it's just like when you're playing more than one table. Now, I was only playing 2 tables at the time. If you watch the video, I have the $22 bounty builder on Stars up, and those were the only 2 tournaments that I was playing. So I wasn't super overwhelmed. I probably could have been taking notes, but at this time, no. And the other thing is there's a lot of Eastern players. So some of the names with the writing and stuff like that, it's hard to kind of distinguish exactly who's who. So I try to go by the pictures and stuff like that.
Good point. Yep.
So it gets really, really tricky. So if WPT is listening, maybe update your software, put in some notes. But because I've been playing on the site so much and been streaming it, I've been, making suggestions to them and stuff like that. So hopefully that's on their radar.
I guess if we had a sense of like, are they the kind of player that raises with draws, or are they only the kind of player that raises with 2 pair or better? Like that would really inform our decision making here.
My overall consensus would be like, I think they do actually have worse 10s from what I've seen on this site. I really do feel like they could raise worse 10s. Like they could just be overvaluing a 10 with maybe a single diamond, just from the experience that I've had on the site. And I even say, like, right before he puts the chips in, you hear me say, like, I don't think I can fold to a raise, and he puts the raise in as I like the words are leaving my mouth. So that made it kind of interesting as well. Because then I'm there like, oh, I just thought about that situation now. It's too late. I already bet.
One of the things that just sucks in this spot is, the other thing is we're going to be out of position for the whole rest of the hand. We're not going to have range advantage because they're going to be the ones that have taken the initiative by raising our flop bet here. So even if they have like 10 jack with the jack of diamonds and we've got 10 king with the king of diamonds, they're dominated by us. We've got them wrapped up 6 ways from Sunday. We still might end up folding to their action later in the hand, even if they are overvaluing a thin value bet. Like, it feels like we're in a position now where it's going to be very difficult for us to realize our equity in the hand all the way through the river. Which is why I don't play garbage hands like King 10 offsuit. Don't play.
Well, I was just going to say, when you're out of position, equity realization is much lower than when you're in position. Yeah. Yeah. Because he can act last and you really don't have the option of doing something that is going to take him off his hand. Because as Jim Reed always says, by taking particular actions, you're letting your opponent play perfectly. And when you're out of position, you don't have a choice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lousy feeling. Okay, so it sounds like you did play it as a call here, Ben. Chris, was there anything else about this decision point that you wanted to talk about?
No, I mean, I think it's a really interesting spot, but this is one of the exact kind of things that we protect ourselves by checking this spot rather than betting it, because this is a really painful spot. Like, it's like, well, I have that king of diamonds. It's good, but as Eric pointed out, it's also kind of like it weights them a little more towards value too, which isn't good. But it also gives us, like, I'm searching for the word here. What's the?
It's not
Eric, help me out, Eric. What's the skydiving thing when you're like, we need some help?
Yeah. It's the emergency chute.
Do you want to cut away?
Okay, that's what I want.
Yeah, Eric's the guy to ask, of course.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. That's what I want. That's what the King of Diamonds is, right? It's gonna help me out if this all goes to hell. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's, I probably would be calling this, I think, because I have the King of Diamonds.
And then it's just
Safety
good
net.
turn or river cards. Yeah, safety net. Yeah, that's right. But there's just no good turn or river cards other than tens or kings, right? Like, unless you know that the two of them are going to be diamonds and one of them's the ace of diamonds. I guess that would also be okay.
Well, the
Would you
first
feel
one,
a lot more
go
comfortable if you had checked and you were just calling a raise
Yes. Yeah.
or calling a bet.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you
Keep the
feel a
pot
lot more
small.
comfortable with that? And that's why you have these types of hands in your checking range, because you can defend with them if they bet into you. And to Chris's point earlier, if they check back, now you're feeling really good about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, the bet will be smaller to call.
Yeah.
If you check.
so Ben does call, and then we get a 5 of diamonds on the turn. So do we like that? Do we not? I don't know, right? So this is exactly what Jim was saying. Cards, there are no great turn cards for us when we make this call. I think there's no way that we can do anything but check now, right? Nobody advocating to lead out here, right? Okay, so
No,
we
he's
check.
probably got pocket fives.
Yeah, is villain Chris Jones by any chance? Because that really weights him towards.
Nah, he'd have the
five.
5 of diamonds if he did that. That's I mean, not that anyone would do that, but so we do check, and then villain bets. If I remember this right, Ben. No, villain checks.
Villain checks back, and they check back like pretty quickly. Like they don't.
That's right.
They don't mess. They don't mess around. It's just check, which
Okay, so
was
we go
really
check,
surprising
check.
to me.
And then we get 9 of spades on the river, which we check again. I think what you said was, you were gonna call. I think on stream you said, "I'll call a reasonable bet," and then villain basically puts you all in.
Yeah, he
Plus
makes a pot size bet. So there's 35.1 in the pot, and we have 50.5 behind.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty
close.
massive. We'll have chips left over, but we're not going to have a very big stack. I think 15 big blinds or something like that.
The turn 5 of diamonds doesn't scare me as much when the big blind has folded, because I don't think, other than the diamond aspect, I don't think it really smashes the in-position player as much. And then knowing that we've got the king is nice. The 9, I hate the 9. I hate the 9 on the river, given the kind of hands that we were talking about being ahead of in our opponent's range. That improves a lot of theirs. And now there's a straight out there, plus some 2-pair combos that we were comfortably ahead of before. And of course they could check a flush. Do we think them checking back the turn really takes a lot of the flushes out of their range? Like I feel like some tricky players are just going to check there and try and get value on the river.
If Ben said that there's a lot of people that potentially satellited into this and might be a softer field, like this is a classic, like entry level player. Oh, I got the flush. I better check to not give away the strength of my hand. And then when it checks behind and then they get on the river, they're like, well, now I got to get value. And maybe they'll think I'm bluffing here. So I'd be running for the hills on this river personally.
And remember that we said that almost all the hands that he would have bet that we were ahead of were flush draws.
Right.
So now he's hit his flush draw, or he had us beat to begin with.
Yep.
I don't even want to tell you what this player had, because you guys are just gonna be like, wow. Earlier I was trying not to laugh because I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe I got check raised on this flop.
So is everyone checking the river? Does anyone like a blocking bet here or something? Ultimately, we're stuck with top pair, second kicker on a board that's flushed and straighted. I don't know. Is this blocker bet territory, or is it just always a check and then we respond to the size of the bet? Seems like the size of the bet has to be a pretty crucial element in our decision making here.
Yeah, I think you have enough showdown value that you really don't want to jeopardize that by having him check, raise over the top of you. I know the blocking bet makes sense, but we saw him raise us when we bet on the flop.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he's capable of that. So I don't know. I just hope to check it down and be able to see a showdown with this hand. I'm just not real comfortable after the raise on the flop.
The other nice thing about the check is that it really weakens our range. If our opponent's thinking about it, all we've done is bet call the flop and then checked on all future streets. So we might induce some bluffs, but it doesn't feel like there's a lot of bluffs left with this run out, right?
And that's what I was trying to find, like in game, like you see me like going through it and I'm like, oh, what does he have for like what? I'm just trying to think of some stuff. And I always hate that when it's hard to come up with bluffs. It's usually not a bluff, but I really wanted to believe that it was a bluff.
Yeah, of course.
So I made a bad call.
Yeah. Right. So end the suspense here, Ben. So he makes a big bet. You called, and what did he roll over?
So he had the 9 of hearts, 5 of hearts.
Oh my God! What? 9 of hearts, 5 of hearts. Let's go back to the flop here for a second. So the flop is 10 of clubs, 7 of diamonds, 3 of diamonds.
That's a runner, right?
That's a runner 2 pair. I thought he had some 2 pair combos in there. I did not have 9-5. What's he even doing pre-flop? Okay, fine. So, yeah, Chris, you're
sure
muted, but
you weren't playing on Ignition?
How? I don't know how this type of player always gets rewarded. It just doesn't it feel like this is
because I had a sniff like I had a little like this isn't right, like because my first instinct on the river was, oh, this is just a fold now. You hear me say that on the tape. You hear me say, oh, this is just a fold now with my king 10 when he bets out the 35 big blinds. And of course, your gut read is always usually the one you should go with. But then I went back to him checking the turn. And I'm like, well, what's he checking the turn with? And then I'm like, well, if I only lose to ace 10, but what are the bluffs? And then I couldn't come up with any bluffs. And then it's like, then I didn't make that.
And then I called. Yeah. I couldn't come up with any bluffs. And then I called. Yeah.
But
yeah,
now you'll know
a little bit.
Now you'll know to range him as 9-5.
Yeah.
As the bluffs.
Dolly Parton. Yeah, that's brutal. So I guess he checked the turn. I mean, it's dangerous to project on other players about this kind of thing. But like a conventional player checks the turn because they picked up some showdown value, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my
scared by the flush.
Well, that was the 5 of diamonds, though, wasn't
35. It? Yeah, no, there's no way
they still lose to flushes, though.
I know.
Yeah,
I
think the 5 is good at showdown. So like the 9,
and I still might have 2 pair. Right? Could I still have 2 pair in this? Could I not? I could open some 10-9 suited.
Yeah, 10-9 for sure.
10-9 suited.
Even 9-7. 9-7 probably C betting.
10-7
maybe. Right. Yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but he doesn't know that.
Rob is the champion for this kind of thinking. This is why I love having Rob around. Rob,
right? I mean,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say Rob and I are talking about this kind of player and how we are encountering this kind of thing a lot in the stakes that we're playing, and we kind of. A lot of us here on the panel, sometimes we suffer from some fancy play syndrome because we're kind of projecting a level of competence on these other players that is not there. It's unwarranted. Because I think this is.
But until you know, you still have to play it as if this person knows what he's doing. So our conversation is not from that conversation we had about the flop and the turn. And the conversation we had on the river, none of that changes. All that changes now is our note on this guy. that he doesn't have a frickin' clue. He doesn't think about what you have. All he knows is what he has. And so on the flop, he knew for a fact that Ben had ace king. And this flop was no good for ace king. So he decided to raise him thinking that Ben was going to fold his ace king, because that's what people raise with. The only thing people raise with is ace king. They always have ace king. That's the mentality.
I'm so glad that I saved this and that none of you guys actually went and like watched the 7-hour stream or whatever it was and went and like picked out the end of the hand and like had a sneaking suspicion as to what was going on. Cause yeah,
Wow.
this was a doozy. This was a
Wow.
doozy.
Man, I gotta figure out how to get on the WPT site, I think.
Right? This is what I was saying. I was like, well, I guess, I mean, this is why I came here, because
Right.
this is what I wanted, kind of, in a way. If the 9 doesn't come,
Oh yeah.
this goes, 100 different ways differently. And it's just one of those situations. But I think the thing that I took away from it was me on the river saying, oh, this is a fold. And then going, oh, wait a minute. And then that's where I get caught up, like you say, with the fancy play syndrome of what is this, what are they doing here? Like just completely unsure. And the action too is super weird. So, yeah.
But you always have to tell yourself, if you're getting bad beat, that means you got it in good. And that's, that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is it so hard to not project what you're thinking on other players? What do you guys do? I mean, especially if somebody's better than you and they know more than you, you don't even know what they're thinking of. I've heard people say, well, that was dumb calling down with second pair, but there's a lot of times you should call down with second pair. And, but if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That's true.
And so you kind of project your good play onto the worst players, and then you project your bad play onto the better players. And how do you not do that? What do you guys do to not project onto the other players?
Well, the only thing you can do is, before you know how a person plays, is you have to play it as close to GTO as your brain allows you to. Make the right types of plays that you would make against any random player. Until you can start gathering data on that player to understand what types of hands he's opening, what types of hands he's calling, what types of hands, is he ever bluffing? Until you get that type of information that allows you to put a different type of range on him and different types of actions on him, you have to play it as if he knows what he's doing, and you have to play as close to GTO as possible. But once you find out what he's doing wrong, then you can start taking advantage of that.
Yeah, I would say start with equilibrium with adjustments for population.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like Andrew Prokus says in his GTO book, when they move an inch, we move a mile. So if we feel like they're deviating a little bit in one direction, we should be deviating a lot in the other direction. So if we feel like they are putting chips in bad, then we should really be coming along a lot more often, because that's kind of the mistake that they're making. And obviously, I'd love to be in a situation where all my C bets are getting raised by people with only 2 backdoor straights and like not a lot of equity in the hand. Because sorry, Chris.
So theoretical question, because this is one I struggle with, right? Let's say we weren't actually actively playing this hand, but we saw it happen. We saw this player, they just got almost a whole stack because they check or they raised with 9-5 of hearts on that board, and they got there, right? We saw that happen. Now we're in the spot, they've just raised us, and we've got a hand like King 10, sort of this like decent hand. Is our adjustment against that player to raise a hand that we would probably never really choose to? I mean, are we going to shove? Are we going to go all in against this player we have deemed as like being like kind of crazy and wild, and try to, I mean, what is the adjustment against that kind of player once we've seen that.
Well, while some other folks are getting their thoughts together to unmute, there's definitely two schools of thought on this. Like Rob mentioned earlier, I don't like making actions that our opponents can only play perfectly against us with, which is an argument against shoving. But the argument for shoving is that we actually pick up a pretty good pot here all the times that they fold, even if we're crushing their equity. And so we can just end the hand right now, maybe get called by a worse hand, but probably not. Probably we're only going to get called by better hands that have us crushed. But that happens at a pretty low frequency if they're raising all the hands from their value hands down to, double backdoor straights with no other equity in the hand. That's a lot of hands that they're raising with. I don't like the idea of just letting them continue with their better hands that have us crushed. But in the long run, we pick up a pretty good pot here with a hand that's going to be hard to play on future streets. So there's got to be some value to shoving. I think the other value would just be holding on for dear life, right? I wish we knew how they would act on the river if they didn't make two pair. That would make things a little easier for us. But because they didn't, after that raise on the flop, they didn't really put any other chips in bad. And maybe we are bluffing there and folding the flop, at a certain frequency that makes that raise less terrible than we're thinking it is. But I don't really know, Chris. I'm going to go with hashtag it depends. Any other thoughts? What other adjustments? Don't leave me out on a limb here, gang. What adjustments might some of you make if we had this note and then we found ourselves in the hand with this player? Would it predispose us towards folding to the flop raise or calling or shoving? Thought I saw someone unmute there.
I'm more wondering about the river, because the river is he's really polarizing, and I'm just trying to think if he actually has worse hands that we can beat at that point, or if he just gets there and we still have to just fold. Is my call good? Did I make a good call even though I lost? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. You know what I'm going to say, Ben?
This is where you got to.
I know.
They always have it.
They always have it. That's Rob's line on the river.
Well, this guy's a maniac, right? I mean, basically, he's a maniac. He's playing any two cards, and he's trying to outbet people to get him to fold a hand. The minute you called, he shut down. Even when he's paired his 9, he shut down. So, in this kind of player, it might be worthwhile to bet out again on the turn in this situation. And by doing that, you're showing so much strength into his at whatever it is, because you know that he's doing this now with just about any two cards trying to get people to fold. So if you bet into him on the turn, chances are he's going to fold because he's going to assume that you have an overpair.
John Kroll,
Just a
you
thought.
had
Except that the next time he's playing this, he's got pocket kings.
Right.
There's no way to know.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it just goes to show aggressive action is difficult to play against, right? This is why we talk a lot about how adding some aggression to your game can make you a more difficult opponent.
Rob, if it's a cash game, you want to get to the other side of him.
Yeah, seat change. No, seriously. Okay,
seat change, definitely.
You can't do it in tournaments, but if you play cash games, there's nothing wrong with just taking that seat change button. And this would be the kind of player I'd rather have on my right than on my left, for sure. Eric Anderson?
I just want to go on a tangent now. The flop is 10-7-3 with 2 diamonds. Do you think his 2-bet on the flop would have been better if it was a rainbow flop? Because we were talking about the only hands to have are flush draws mostly and sets. So it's like Rob said, he's trying to get people to fold.
Yep.
And you'd be much more likely to get somebody to fold if it was a rainbow flop.
Yeah, if we can eliminate flush draws from his raising range, then that really weighs it more heavily towards value. That makes a lot of sense. Thinking player would have to would have to fold there more at a higher frequency.
Or just 9-5. If there's not the 5 of diamonds on the turn, and it's another diamond, the 9-5 of diamonds. I even say afterwards, I was like, just give him the flush.
Yeah.
Then I'll like, okay, nice hand. But
I like it a lot better with his 9-5 of diamonds. I don't even think it's like I'm making that raise probably some of the time anyway. With the backdoor straights and the flush draw there. But yeah, gross spot. Hey, Ben, thanks for calling so that we at least got some entertainment out of this experience.
Thanks for playing bad in a $330 tournament that you satellited into. Really A1 job there.
That's a good point.
No, I
close
love
to
it.
Max Payne.
I enjoy poker too much to let bad beats bring me down. I played You Can't Keep a Good Dog Down. It's from a Disney movie.
Nice.
All dogs go to heaven. All dogs go to heaven. So that's I think that's going to be my new motto on the stream.
I love it. Well, thanks to Ben Enslow for putting this fantastic hand together. Thanks to Chris Jones for putting it in the forums and providing this fantastic analysis. And again, folks, do click the link and go check out the forum post. You'll see some great images and graphics there that'll help break it down. Particularly, Chris loves this Flopzilla equity graph, which compares the equity of various players across their entire range of hands. It's not something that I see a lot of other people using, and it's been very helpful in our learning material to get at some sort of counterintuitive aspects of range analysis that Chris is so good at. So, all right, any final thoughts before we close this baby out? We had a good, long conversation about this. It was a tricky spot. These multi-way pots, man, I still don't know the right way to play them. Like, you start this hand over for me, I have no idea what to do. So, just goes to show, poker's hard. All right. Well, thanks to Taylor Moss, Eric Jin, John Somsky, Ben Enslow, Rob Washam, and Chris Jones. And thanks to Eric Anderson and John Kroll for joining us here, our premium members who we adore. Mostly thanks to you, the listeners, you and the Running Aces Hotel Racetrack and Casino. All right. Have a great night, everybody. See you again next week.